delay, a lot of technical difficulties, but we are very honored to have Max Gueguenis here from PolicyEngine to talk about the work that he's done on modeling the potential impact of the U.S. election. So without further ado, Max Gueguenis.
Thank you all so much for the opportunity to share with you some of the work that I and a number of my colleagues who are here today, Kamala and David Trimmer, have done analyzing tax and benefit policies in the election. Really, this culminates a wide range of projects that we've done over the past couple of years to build an open source software platform that allows for analysis of really a wide range of tax and benefit policies in both the US and the UK. Been a busy day because UK actually had their big budget announcement today, the first one of the new Labour government. So it's a very exciting week for us. And I'm eager to share with you sort of some of our findings, some of the opportunities, I think, especially for the academic community. We hope we can empower you to study these kind of topics, contribute to the model, and provide feedback on what we can do better to be more policy relevant. So with that, I will just note that Tuesday is going to move a lot of money around. So there's a lot more to society than money, but money matters quite a bit too. I'm not just talking about poly market, and I don't know if any of you are invested in the prediction markets here. That a lot of that will be resolved, and actually the polls are very close, but the stakes are very high. Just to give a couple examples. Trump has proposed to exempt Social Security benefits from taxation. Kamala Harris has proposed an expansion to the child tax credit, which was expanded in 2021. And maybe even bigger than specific policies in the presidential campaigns, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you may have known it as Trump tax cuts, those were instituted in 2018, and they expire at the end of next year. Whoever wins the White House and also controls the different branches of Congress is going to have a very significant role in determining how those tax cuts are extended, what parts maybe are repealed. Is it an opportunity to introduce some new reforms that may have not been part of the Trump tax cuts, but could be in the future? People have talked about a carbon tax or a border-adjusted destination-based cash flow tax. There's kind of all these interesting ideas. And this is a multi-trillion-dollar exercise that Congress and the president will be embarking on next year. So with that context, I want to sort of tell you a bit about what PolicyEngine is, give a few demos. So this is all going to be, we do reports. You can see the reports on our website, policyengine.org. But really the heart of what we do is build an open source software platform. So we're going to provide a few demos of ways that we are helping people understand the personal impacts of the presidential election and the platforms that the candidates have proposed. Personal impacts just of what policy looks like today. And then we've also built in a number of the policy reforms into our micro-simulation calculator. So that's what lets you figure out how much are these going to cost, what's the impact on poverty and inequality going to be of different provisions. Everything we're showing you can do for free from your own computer. And finally, we'll sort of talk about what we're doing next to improve the model. And we'll save plenty of time for our conversation as well. I also want to take a minute to introduce myself and my colleagues, Pavel and David. So I sort of came into this world from technology. I worked at Google for a number of years. I then started a think tank called the UBI Center to do open source research into universal basic income, cash transfer, guaranteed income kinds of policies. And we actually built PolicyEngine within the UBI Center to do our own research, and then realized this could serve a broader purpose by really empowering lots of different think tanks. My colleague Pavel is an economist here and has done a huge amount of research into the US tax code. Actually, he started PolicyEngine Canada as well, which we hope to launch in the next year, essentially all of himself. And he's especially been doing research today that you'll see on the personalized calculator of the election. My colleague David as well used to work at a think tank called the Niskanen Center, People's Policy Project, formerly George Washington University, and he will share with you some of the work around the Social Security tax exemption. Okay, so I haven't really talked about what PolicyEngine is too much. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's better, okay.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so Policy Engine is a nonprofit that operates in the US and the UK, soon Canada. And our mission is not to just be a think tank. We are providing an open source software platform that powers a pretty wide range of use cases in economic policy. So you'll see a few of these today, but you can enter information about your household, estimate what your taxes and benefits are. So everything from the EITC, child tax credit, state income taxes, but also benefit programs like food stamps and Medicaid. We also serve an API. So other organizations build their own experiences, helping people navigate the existing tax and benefit system. And instead of having to rebuild all the very complex rules of each program, they just call our API and we do all that work for them. And I think the part that is most relevant to today is you can design a custom policy reform. So we'll look at the specific policies that the candidates have introduced, but you can actually just go in and play around with hundreds. I think we're up to probably thousands of different policy levers. You can enter different assumptions around how people respond. So different elasticities around behavioral responses. And then we'll show you a wide range of analytics around poverty, inequality, the cost, and you can also access it through a Python package if you want to go deeper into it. It works quite well with all the AI. And the technique that we use is called microsimulation. So has anyone heard of microsimulation before? Simpler than the long name sounds. So it's really just a calculator. There are two parts to a microsimulation model. One's a calculator, where you have all the rules of some program, and then you're plugging in a household's characteristics, and you're saying, okay, here's what taxes they would be liable for, here are the benefits they're eligible for. You have that one household, and then you pair it with a representative survey, or some sort of representative data. It could be administrative data. So you're running that calculation not just on one household, but on thousands, in our case, over 100,000 households. And when you sum that all up, you can get a wide range of analytics as a result. So one simple example here is, suppose you have $100,000 income, no kids. We can use that rules engine to say, okay, your taxes would be $30,000. You're not eligible for benefits. You're left with $70,000. And then the interesting part is when you make it flexible enough, so you can say not just under current law, how that looks, but also how it looks under some policy reform. So this is a policy reform that's a tax cut for this person. So it's going to go from 30,000 taxes to 25,000. So that's a $5,000 boost to their net income. And then the really magical part happens when you say not just one household, but 3 whole households, or 100,000, it's more likely. And this is going to affect different people in different ways, right? You've got a child tax credit. Maybe there's some sort of personal exemption where, depending on the number of people, your taxable income falls. These things get very complex. So it's really helpful to have a calculator that can capture those intricacies, the details of each policy. That lets you figure out what the taxes are under current law, under the reform law. And the last piece here is every household has a weight. So this is basically how many real world households does this specific person represent? Because you're not going to have a 340 million household, or I guess 150 million household data set. You want to have some sort of sample. Some of them you might want oversample, undersample for different reasons. So you basically do a weighted aggregation of this that gets you into the billions of the kind of policy impacts. There are a number of microsimulation tools out there, but ours is really the only open source one that covers all the different programs that are relevant. And you'll see this in a minute, for understanding people's true net income, what their true marginal tax rate schedule is. So sort of their full work incentives are going to depend not just on their federal top line, you're in the 30% tax bracket. It's going to depend on their state taxes, the benefits, phase outs of different tax credits and deductions. So we're able to show that. And you can do it all from a mobile device, from your computer, and it's all open source. So we invite sort of contributions. That's how a number of our employees got involved. It's just sort of helping out, develop it, and use it for their own research. And with that, we will start talking about the actual policies. So there's a lot going on in this election. We're only going to cover a slice of it here, but we do model most of the tax proposals in the Harris and Trump plans. So these cover everything from restoring tax credits from the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021. This is a big part of Kamala Harris's proposal. Both candidates have proposed exempting tips from income tax. Trump has proposed also exempting overtime and from income and payroll tax. On the tariff side, Trump is very well known for sort of looking to reduce imports. So this was, I think, 10% and actually 60% now is the China tariff. So all goods imported from China will face at least a 60% new tariff. Trump's exempting Social Security benefits. You'll see David talk about that. And then some changes to itemized deductions, capital gains, and we can't quite see this one. But basically, Kamala Harris also has proposed a number of policies that would raise taxes on high-income people, income above $400,000 or more. To tell you more about how these actually work, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Pavel Karchuk to go through this brand new calculator. We haven't done any. We literally launched it this morning. So feedback welcome, and I'll turn it over.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So yeah, we built a personalized calculator to assess the impact of the highlighted reforms that Max has just talked about on kind of specific households with given inputs. So I'll give it a second. So the idea is that we ask for some personal or some income information. You can get more detailed if you want to talk about kind of investment income, capital gains, as that is all affected by certain provisions, as well as some sources for itemized deductions, if you want to get more complex, and then also just some basic inputs based on expenses. And we then run our simulation against the baseline, so your current situation, the current law, as well as with the Harris and Trump policies combined. And I want to go through two scenarios. One is a student. Let's make that person 20 years old. This is a case where I found myself 4 years ago. Let's say $10,000 of annual income, and then I'll give myself around $2,000 of tip income and $3,000 of overtime income. And then, given our location, I'll also take a person in Virginia. And with everything else kept at zero, what we do now is first we generate the baseline results. So this person would have, under current law, baseline net income of $14,500, and then the calculator further estimates the impact of the Harris reforms and the Trump, and then we also break it down into the individual categories to see which credits are specifically affected, which part of the taxes are specifically affected, and then we also have a section to note kind of our assumptions, some of the limitations that we have, so we can see now under the Harris reform, this household would get an additional $1,800 per year of this student. And under the Trump reform, it would be an additional $229. And for the Harris reform, it's mostly the addition of the federal earned income tax credit, which they were previously ineligible for. And then also given Virginia has an EITC match that also would decrease because of that. And then also some changes in the taxes because of the extension of tips and under the Trump reform. They would get a payroll tax deduction. Great. And then second scenario I want to go through is, let's make it my parents, which are an elderly couple. It's one of them is 68 years old and retired, and the other parent is 62. And what they do is one of the parents is gonna continue working at $60,000 annual wages, and then let's make it $30,000.
Can you all see this okay, or should we zoom in a bit?
Oh yeah,
Maybe zoom in.
Maybe hit
It's also
the
this
accept.
back here.
Yeah, back here.
Is it better?
You can minimize the window on the side too, I think. Oh, nice.
Beautiful. Does this work better? Do you want me to zoom in further? Okay,
Yeah.
beautiful. My bad. So yes, elderly couple, 68 and 62, $60,000 of employment income for one of the people. No tip income, and then I'll still leave inputs such as capital gains and investment income at zero. But you can take a look at some of the sources. We can also run your auto loans, interest deduction. Then I actually want to give them.
I think I have a question in the audience, actually.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to like assume if certain policies don't get passed, if most presidents don't get their entire plan?
Yes, so for that, we would need to go into our actual policy engine and adjust it. This calculator assumes all the policies that are currently being talked about are actually implemented. A great point, maybe in the future, I will add it.
Can you maybe just repeat the question? I'm not sure if the mic picked it up. So,
Oh, yeah, the question was whether if certain parts of the proposed policy combination are not being passed, and if we can assess that, not through this calculator, but in our mini policy web interface, you can do that, and you can also enter more of the household details, kind of what the coding books. Great. So yes, I'll just give that some annual spending in pretty goods. This is a little bit below average in the US, I believe. And then, same thing happens, we'll calculate the baseline, and then we'll shortly get the results for the Harris and Trump administrations. In this case, under Harris, there's actually no change. Harris has not proposed to make any adjustments to the Social Security income and its taxation. And under Trump, I believe they'll see an increase due to the Social Security tax cuts, but also that would then be decreased due to new tariffs. And we assume that the tariffs currently at 100% pass through to consumers, obviously, can change. You can see all of that are more kind of the assumptions that we make within. But then we can see that in the breakdown, there's some amounts for tariffs and then some changes to the income tax before any refundable credits. If you have any questions, yeah, go ahead.
This is slightly on the politics side, but do you think this will reduce populism? I mean, if the average voter can just now go on your website and find out exactly, based on what politicians are promising, exactly who they'll be better off with, politicians will be forced to actually make policies that people can go, yes, my number will be bigger. People vote with what they'll be better off with. Do you think it will reduce populism in the long term by using your website?
That's a great question. I know Max, you thought a lot more about that question, but I would certainly hope so. I think data-driven decision-making, especially in that policy space, is a great way forward, and to force people to actually think about real household applications with a simple tool that people can actually use without going into mailing tax forms and reading through tax law is kind of, at least for me, a big dream to come true. So yeah.
Thank you.
Sweet. If there's nothing else, I'll pass it on to David. We can talk a little bit more about some of the specific Trump Social Security cuts, which I just mentioned. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, so I'm going to be going through the demo. So we're going to be looking at Donald Trump's proposal to make Social Security benefits non-taxable. So just quick background. So the current structure for Social Security benefit taxation is only benefits are partially taxed. So if your combined income exceeds $25,000, 50% of your benefits are taxable. And so combined income is your AGI, any non-taxable interest, and then half of your Social Security benefits. So if your combined income falls below $25,000, and that's for the single threshold, or for a single filer. If you fall below that threshold, your benefits are not taxed. Okay. If you're above $34,000, an additional 35% of your benefits are taxed. The 50% of your benefits that are taxed, that revenue gets allocated to the Social Security trust funds. The 35% additional, that goes towards the Medicare hospital insurance trust funds. So if we wanted to try to simulate what Social Security benefits being non-taxable, all you got to do, set those two rates to 0. And then we can also consider some behavioral responses by including some CBO elasticities into the reform. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, can't really move past that good. We're going to try our best here. We're going to go to PolicyEngine.org. And right now on our website, you can see we have a dashboard with all of the presidential proposals. So you can click on them and then read our analysis. Right now, what we want to do is we want to compute some policy reforms. Yeah. So on our website, you can see right here where I'm circling, we have a bunch of different departments. This is where all of our parameters are housed in. So for IRS, that's tax policy, Health and Human Services, that relates to health, Social Security, that's going to be Social Security benefits, and SSI. Additionally, with our parameters, we've painstakingly made sure that parameters have been updated for past years and for future. So I'll just give you an example right here. Let's go to credits. Go to the child tax credit, fundability. So the maximum refundable portion of the CTC, let me scroll down real quick. So in 2018, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed. This number went up to 1,400, and then it's been slowly going up by $100 every year or so due to inflation. But in 2026, it's going to go back down to 1,000. So we've made sure we've modeled this appropriately, and we've done that with the rest of our parameters. Some analysis here. So let's go back to Social Security. We're going to go Social Security, taxability, and we're going to go to our rates. So we have our base rate here, that's our 50%, and our additional rate, that's 85, that's just the 50 plus the 35. So what we're going to do is, there we go. I got it. All right, we're going to set this to 0. There we go. Set the additional rate to 0. There we go. Okay, so now we have both our rates set to 0. So if we just wanted to see what would happen without considering behavioral responses, we're good to go. However, we want to try to include them. So one of our functions is you can create a reform and then you can add onto it. So all I'm going to do is include our CBO central elasticities. And I'm just going to hit add. And now, right here, you can see both of our forms for Social Security, and then we have labor supply elasticities. Final thing I'm going to do is make sure we're calculating for the right year. We're assuming that this proposal is going to start in 2025, so we have 2025, and we want to use our enhanced CPS, that's the current population. That is the standard for what we use. Okay, and then we are going to calculate economic impact, and it popped up right away. Right, so we have our policy, and right here we can see the key results. See that's going to cost just under $105 billion for 2025. Rate poverty slightly, and increase net income by 16. Make sure this is right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and increasing by 16% for people, decreasing it for 9%. And right here in this menu. What's that? Yeah, it's the labor supply response. Okay, so we can get a closer look into what's happening here. So we can look at the budgetary impact. So right now we can see the federal tax revenue, state and local income tax, and a little bit of reduction in benefit spending. So federal tax, that's all a reduction of the revenue going to the trust funds. State and local tax, because state AGI is tied to federal AGI, some states, we're seeing an interaction there. And benefit spending, that's coming from our labor supply responses. And then we can see distributional impact. You can see the percentages for each income decile, which is probably going to be better if we look at average. And we can see.
Zoom out a little bit. It seems like the charts.
What's that?
Do you want to zoom out just slightly?
There we go. Okay, so yeah, we can see the charts here. We can see that the first 3 deciles not benefiting a ton, but as we get up to 4th, 5th, all the way to 9th, benefiting almost more than 1,000, and 10s going down a little bit. That's probably because of labor supply responses as well, which we'll go over in a sec. You can also see our winners and losers chart. So this shows the percentage of each, the percentage of households benefiting in each income decile. So the dark blue, they're benefiting by more than 5% of their net income, light blue, less than that. And then on the right, we have the light gray, they're being made worse by less than 5% of their net income, dark gray, it's more than 5%. We can look at our poverty impact. We break down by age, race, gender. We also do that for deep poverty as well. And we can see Slightly ambiguous effect, slight increases in child poverty, working age adults, but a reduction in senior poverty, which makes sense since this is a reform that's mainly targeting them. We can go to inequality, we can look at the Gini index, net income share for the top 10%, 1% as well. And then we can look at our labor supply. So what we have here for our labor supply response is we have an income effect and a substitution effect. We're seeing a negative income effect because as we're reducing people's taxes, their incentive to work is less, so number of hours worked decreases. However, there's a positive substitution effect because we're reducing taxes. The next dollar you earn is more valuable to you, so that increases your incentive to work. However, these are going in opposite directions, and the income effect is larger, so we're seeing a reduction in hours worked, and we also see that when it comes to earnings. And then also, for any of the policies that we create, we can also do an AI summary. So we have 3 different modes: explain like I'm 5, normal, and then we have wonk mode, which is basically like expert mode. So you can generate analysis, and it'll start writing about whatever we've included in the reform. It'll include text, a bunch of charts that we've just gone over, and we'll get some key levels, key results at the top, and then a bunch of charts. And of course, for all of our reforms, we can reproduce in Python, put this in a Python notebook, and reproduce the microsimulations and break it down even further if you want. So yeah, that's yes.
I think it's a great system. Is it possible to use it in reverse, almost put in the desired impacts that you would like to see from the system, and have it tell you which policies will achieve it or which policies will get closest to the desired impacts that you choose to list?
Actually, I'm gonna take that.
Sure. I love this idea, and yeah, we are, I think, taking some steps toward this vision of, in our view, almost having an AI policy advisor. Right now, we're using large language models to explain the impact of policy reforms. We're also using machine learning behind the scenes to make the data as accurate as possible. You could envision a system where you say, I am trying to cut child poverty in half, but I don't want to increase the deficit. I want to end welfare cliffs. I mean, right, some of these are like impossible. But if you have someone who actually has a realistic goal, and then it just takes figuring out which policy actually accomplishes that, you could have an AI system try thousands or millions of policies in the cloud, and use some optimization routines to sort of nail in on that policy that's going to best achieve those goals. That feels also, to your earlier question, a better vision for democracy, in our view, where you're not arguing about the specific policy levers, right? It's like exempting tips from tax, or right? That sounds very appealing to some group of people, but even low-income people who get tips are not affected by that at all because they don't pay tax today. So it's like a lot of these programs have brands around them, and if we instead say, what is our vision for how society can look, and then how we move those levers to get closer to that society, that, we're very excited by that vision.
I'm curious if you plan, or if there's anything to like extend like calculations on policies effect on other policies, because of course, you have eliminating taxes on Social Security, and Trump also wants to basically eliminate income tax entirely. And like, if you could model how that would affect the funding of Social Security, because it's losing all of this money because Social Security is no longer being taxed. Like, is that something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, so in the report that I wrote for this proposal, we actually did break down how much revenue is being lost from the Social Security and the Medicare trust funds. I think, definitely trying to see how different policies impact each other. That's really important. That's check out the analysis if you have time. But that's something definitely interested in.
Yeah, removing income tax entirely, we didn't leave that in. It would obviously be very costly. And it, the maximum possible tax revenue from tariffs, which is what Trump has proposed and said. There's some work from the Tax Foundation showing that's sort of not nearly enough to cover the pull from income tax. A lot of these deficit producing policies create challenges for modeling because there's a lot of disagreement around what the effects of different deficits are. I think that's where these sort of conversations get like, is it increased prices, in which case we should ideally be flowing that through to consumers at some point, or is it reduced wages? Those kind of things make it hard to analyze these really audacious plans.
That's making stuff too complex for a model. Do you guys have like second order and beyond effects in here, like second, third, fourth, going on and on? You have like those accounted for, and those can have a lot of big effects.
The labor supply responses is, and we also have capital gains responses. Those get a couple levels deep. So what we say is basically, here's this policy, it's going to reduce or increase your marginal tax rate, which increases your return to work. We also capture the income effects, as David mentioned. So if you have more money, you can sort of purchase more leisure. Once you have that, we're going to apply elasticities. You can plug in your own, but we sort of apply the ones from Congressional Budget Office. And then we're lowering or increasing your earnings based on how that policy affects your incentives. And then we're recalculating your taxes and benefits from there, right? So if you have some policy that's going to reduce labor supply, that will also probably, for most people, reduce the tax they pay. So there's going to be feedback effects to the total tax revenue of the program. We also are beginning to integrate overlapping generations, sort of these general equilibrium models that capture not just the partial equilibrium effects of people working less or more from these kind of labor incentives, but the feedback effects from that to industry, the government, deficits, and how it affects different sectors and the employment relationships as people optimize their lifetime income, firms optimize their total profits. These become very large systems of so it sort of ties to this question too. Systems of equations that big computers end up solving. It takes a few hours to run, so it's not as exciting a process as click and go. And then I guess to this question around Keynesian multipliers, we don't have that in the model right now. That would be more part of a general equilibrium model. And the ones that we're looking at have both supply and demand effects. So the multiplier is less of a direct concept in that. But we'd like for this to be a platform that you can plug in lots of different macro models and have lots of different kind of assumptions. Even for the same macro model, maybe you have different kind of multiplier you can plug in.
Something I'm curious about, this is like, again, something that would be much harder to model, but it's definitely feel like it's relevant, is like, we have Trump saying, mass deportations, and considering the effects of that already in Florida, like on the Floridian economy, the effect of removing 20 million workers effectively, is that like, do you have any aspirations to include that, or have you?
We haven't yet. That would definitely factor in these general equilibrium models. The addition of labor supply, either through fertility or migration, is a material driver of economic growth. The Congressional Budget Office recently released a report that shows that immigration has increased GDP in the US. When they're doing projections into the future, they have some sort of parameters around how important those factors are. So as we add these more macro model capabilities, we'll also allow people to plug in those parameters, while also suggesting the ones that are most likely to be used by experts at CBO and elsewhere. We have a couple more slides. This was such a great interjection. So thank you, David, and Pavel, for sharing more about how the and please do continue to ask any questions as we wrap up here. So let's see, okay. Now, we have plugged in not just the Social Security, but a wide range of basically, yeah, if I go back here, all the policies that are bold here, we do model in the Policy Engine micro simulation system. And therefore, that enables us to look at not just each of those individual policies, but also the interaction between them. For example, Social Security benefits being exempt from tax is going to interact with potential rate changes. So we can capture those interactions. A number of Kamala Harris's high income tax reforms also interact with each other. So we capture all that, as well as the interaction with state taxes. For example, states often levy taxes based on a concept of income that is originates with the federal government. So that's what gets us to this. I want to emphasize that this is not a complete scoring. There have been some other organizations that have used kind of hodgepodge of models to get at the total impact of everything from tariffs to overtime income exemptions to the child tax credit. This is just those policies that Policy Engine models. Yeah.
Question about like percentages, is that a percentage of the current amount or a 500%?
Or of what?
Or like, for example, with child poverty, that'd be like minus 15% of like it, of like the current like, the end
Yes.
of being 100? Or
Is so the question is if the percentages here are percent or percentage point.
yeah, so
changes,
like
probably,
with
right?
poverty, it'd be like how percent, like the poverty rate would be, so let's say like arbitrarily 10% in the US, 10% of people are in poverty.
Yeah.
Is it like that, or is it just of the current amount of people in poverty, it would be minus that percent?
It's the latter. Yeah, so this is a percent change in the number of people in poverty. We would call that percentage change compared to a percentage point change would be lowering it from say 25 to 10% for child poverty. So as you can see, Harris has revenue raisers here that we are able to model, including capital gains reforms, changes to the Medicare tax and net investment income tax. We have only scored sort of expenditures on the Trump side. Harris's plan reduces poverty through the changes to the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit primarily. And also, we have another calculator that looks at the child tax credit proposals specifically because you may have heard VP candidate JD Vance proposed or sort of suggested that he was interested in a $5,000 child tax credit. We have not modeled that here as Trump has not verified that that's part of his platform, but we have some research on it if you're interested. Overall, Harris's plans also reach a larger set of the population than Trump's do, but also because there are some tax raises, leave some people with less net income, and there's inequality reductions under Harris and increases under Trump.
How far in the long run can your model go to?
We currently go to 2035, and that aligns with the Congressional Budget Office, which is does the full budget window, 10-year budget window. The reason we've added 2035, which was kind of 11-year, is because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act goes from 2026 to 20. Well, we expect that there's going to be conversations next year about from 2026 to 2035. Although we're likely to be embarking on a new project around Social Security solvency, which will extend to 75 years. Great. So there's a whole bunch we didn't cover here, so would encourage you to check out the website. We've got all those buttons with different reports. We've got the calculator Pavel showed. You can play around with your own policies. We also did not show how the household calculator under current law works. So if you want to see crazy charts, including one that got retweeted by Tyler Cowen, it's on Marginal Revolution at one point, highlight my career. We have, it gets really crazy. I mean, some of these marginal tax rate schedules, you'll face 20% rate in one income range, earn $5,000 more, and it's like 90%. And it's because of all these different policies that interact in these unusual ways. I think without, this is not intentional policy choice. It's just the accumulation of interesting ideas that don't really necessarily fit into a whole cohesive framework. So we hope we can help align that to human values more in the future. So a few areas that we're headed in moving forward. We're really looking at 3 different avenues: comprehensiveness, accuracy, and accessibility. So we want the model to be the most comprehensive around state, local, federal taxes and benefit programs, potentially other kinds of taxes too, like a carbon tax. So the most immediate changes we're looking at, we already have SNAP, Medicaid, state and federal income taxes. We have TANF in a few different states. We're looking to add Affordable Care Act, so Obamacare subsidies and childcare subsidies. These often tend to be, especially childcare subsidies, are sort of this care agenda conversation that we think we can help inform. Also really excited about potential state and district breakdowns. So we've done some machine learning work to make the microdata that underpins all our microsimulation results as accurate as possible nationwide. Imagine though, if you were a state policymaker and you could say, this national reform or the reform I'm thinking of in my state, it's going to affect the poverty rate in my district by 3.6%. It's going to leave 40% people better off, 20% people worse off. Those kind of analytics are just totally unattainable today. And we think we can use machine learning to make them available. In terms of accuracy, we've talked about this already a fair bit. We want to extend the behavioral responses. So not just labor supply and capital gains responses, but you could imagine people's responses maybe to fertility or immigration, and also how they change their charitable giving, right? This itemized deduction. Trump also proposed adding an itemized deduction for auto loans. So maybe people purchase instead of lease their cars more. There's a huge range of exciting possibilities that the economics literature can inform, and we can be this translator from the empirical world to the policymaker. And general equilibrium models, similarly, we are very excited for. And the accessibility front, we actually, another, I guess, advantage of our global footprint, we got a grant from a UK organization that's funding a new full redesign of our app. So we're going to enlist a UX research organization, think about how we can bring in AI to the interface. As you saw, we have one live launch where it's a large language model. We use Claude on the back end to turn those kinds of quantitative insights into something that's more comprehensible by the masses. I think we actually just launched a second feature like that too, where we're explaining, okay, here's your SNAP benefit or your child tax credit, but why is the amount that specific amount? So very excited for LLMs to augment the accessibility, and also for the research community, thinking about more R packages, data packages, kind of other ways. Yeah, I went that the wrong pipe.
Yeah. You want the water? You sure?
But really, as I said in the beginning, we're very excited to be here and work with you all. It's really great to see Riley in the audience. We've had some great collaboration thus far through him with GMU. I'm a big fan of the economics department and sort of the unique perspective that GMU brings. And so if you have interest in a conversation about how we can work together, whether that's ideas you might have from the research you're doing around how we can improve some of the ingredients to the model, how we can support your work. If there have been a number of academic projects that use Policy Engine to figure out what someone's marginal tax rate is or what the actual impact of some upcoming reform is. And of course, we're fully open source, so feel free to, if you're looking for an interesting coding project, or we're also looking for interns and other kinds of collaborations, please feel free to reach out. So that is all we had. So thank you again so much for the time.
Thank you so much.
So obviously recently, or rather today, we've had the budget in the UK, which being from England, I'm quite interested in.
Yeah.
Is it possible using your engine to compare the British budget And also to compare that against what American politicians are proposing, because a lot of news articles talk about, if Rachel Reeves introduces X, Y, Z, then X amount, X percent of millionaires will move to New York, or they'll move to Dubai, or whatever it is. Can you compare different countries' policy proposals, and therefore could people in the future use this to decide, you know what, maybe I will move country, maybe I will sort of leave Britain, given the increasing capital gains tax or whatever policy that they're proposing at that given moment in time, and use it in the long run to compare countries and compare politicians.
Absolutely. So the question was basically how you can compare different countries, given Policy Engine operates in the US and the UK, and hopefully more countries in the future. We have just launched a few reports around the autumn budget today, and you can't do this in the app right now. I guess you can screenshot a couple of different charts, but we have actually used the Python package. It's quite easy to develop analytics that compare different policy reforms, different currencies. There's kind of caveats to all this, but absolutely, I think there's a lot that we have learned from operating in both countries. I'll give you one example. In the US, we have a disability policy called supplemental security income. And this has a few features that actually there is bipartisan support for reforming. So one of them is the asset limit. If you have over $2,000 in your bank account, you are ineligible for SSI benefits. Also, once you earn above a certain amount, you start to lose the amount at 50% rate. So you earn an extra $100, you actually only take home 50 of that because SSI is withdrawn. And that's before you're paying taxes, maybe you're losing food stamp benefits, those kind of things. I'll say there's a personal issue, of concern for me. My brother had a spinal cord injury, so I'm somewhat familiar with how these programs for people with disabilities can really constrain your economic opportunity. And which is why it was so interesting to me when we were building Policy Engine UK, stumbled upon this other program, you may be familiar with it, called Personal Independence Payment, PIP. And this is also for disability, but it's completely reframed. It's not about reducing, it's not about providing assistance because you're ineligible or unable to work. It's about the fact that you have a disability that's going to increase your cost of living across different dimensions. Maybe that's getting around town or just getting your daily needs met. So there's no work test, there's no asset limit. It's just about how severe your disability is and what the implied sort of costs are in that. So we've been able to sort of help other Americans and policymakers understand those kinds of policy options. And I think there's a lot more we can do there. In terms of the really interesting question around, are there some dynamics around people's incentives that are informed by the global policy environment? Because people are thinking about where to invest, where to live. And there too, it kind of is relevant to the US system. We were actually just thinking about how to model capital gains elasticities. And a lot of the research around capital gains in the US is based on state level policy reforms. Sort of, okay, California changed it here, so how much did California's capital gains revenue fall? Turns out that's very dependent on what the capital gains rates are outside of California, but still in the US, because people can move, and there is a lot more mobility on that front. So yeah, I do think probably some changes in some countries are going to also get people to move borders. Once we have a general equilibrium model in one country, we can do it in more countries. And the people who are building this open source general equilibrium model really have a vision of having this in every country and being able to model the flows of capital and labor across the countries. So it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but absolutely on the same page.
I was considering like the gas pricing has been like rising up in DMV area, and I was wondering if there's any of your research model is based on like taxation tariffs on oil and gas.
The question was about if we have any models around taxes for fuel and tariffs around gas. Not in the US right now. It would get into the model in the sense of inflation rates in general. We sort of use the Congressional Budget Office's projections around inflation, and presumably they are informed by the changes in gas prices as well. Although in the UK, we do have fuel duty modeled. This was freezing the fuel duty was part of the autumn budget's announcements today, actually. It's kind of hilarious as an aside. Fuel duty nominally rate you sounds like you might know this, like it rises every year by law, but every single year in the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years.
They always freeze it.
Yeah, they freeze it. So like you have this chart where every year it's supposed to go up the next year. And in fact, Rachel Reeves did commit to raising it next year. We'll see.
Should definitely freeze it next.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely it's a major part of the economy. So we're excited to have that. Riley.
So for the tariff calculations or the change in income based off of increased tariff prices.
Yeah.
Is that assuming that people continue to consume the same goods from China?
Yeah, so the question was in the personalized calculator. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we ask about how much people spend on imports from China and from other countries. We ask how much they expect to spend in 2025. So that's sort of after the potential tariffs is the idea there. But yeah, absolutely. We recognize that people would change their spending to sort of minimize their tax liability. We don't have that in the model right now.
Seems like it'd be pretty crazy to actually add in. So
Yeah.
So I have two questions. The first one goes based off Alex's one. If you were to do the gas prices one, would you do like every other sector of the economy going up in price because gasoline has to be used to transport stuff? And the second question was about the thing about internships. Like, are you doing a summer internship or?
Yeah. So second question first, we are doing summer internships. We also do internships throughout the year. So we're also looking for spring interns now for those interested. In terms of does gas price affect other goods and services? It absolutely does, and that would be an important part of the model if we were to do it. So there's this sort of subfield in economics, IO economics, where you're actually taking like input-output matrices. So these very big, if you imagine gas and every other good on one axis and then the same kind of parallel on the other axis, how much of each good is composed of other goods and services in the economy. And there you have to basically do some matrix math to say some tax or shock in one good is going to ripple through the economy in other ways. So it is often used for carbon tax modeling as well. Would be definitely part of the project.
If it's okay, I'm just going to ask another question on the UK really quickly.
Yeah.
Just because I'm interested in it. In the US, you vote for one presidential candidate or the other. It's very unlikely unless there's a draw that Donald Trump and Tim Walz will be working together to figure out tax policy, right? But in the UK, it's a lot more likely. We had a coalition in 2010. We had a confidence and supply agreement in sort of 2016, 2017. Is it possible to, using your engine, using your sort of calculator, to consider the likelihood of parties working together, and therefore how one might imagine that would affect sort of how the policies would be implemented or which policies would be implemented? Is that possible? Is that something that can be be considered in a UK system where that's quite likely?
Yeah. So question is basically about in the UK you can have a coalition where you basically have a lot more immediate control of who, well, in some circumstances, I guess you're asking, sometimes there's, like right now.
Right now there's a big majority.
Yeah.
But in 2010 there was a mix of conservative and liberal Democrat policies. You could look at a calculator in 2009 and go, this is what the Conservatives are promising and that will be the effect on me, and this is what the Lib Dems are promising and that will be the effect on me. But would it have been possible to use the calculator, for example, to go, if there was a coalition, this is the likelihood of what each side would bring, and this is the likelihood of the impact?
I mean, in some ways, we have that in the US too, because of the different control of the two branches of Congress and the presidency. So It's a really interesting question. I think the closest answer I have for you is that we are starting another project, also sort of with the vein of this idea of an AI policy advisor. An AI policy advisor requires a couple things. One is the ability to model lots of different policies and figure out the optimal policy given your values. The other part is eliciting those values in the first place. And that's actually, I think, harder done than said. How much do people really value trading off, for example, even deficit hawks, I think, care about child poverty substantially, right? How much do they care about the deficit compared to child poverty, compared to other forms of economic growth? It's really hard to say. There are tools from industry that can help inform it. So when Apple is figuring out how much they want to invest in making the camera better versus the display, or invest in price, they do marketing studies like a conjoint analysis where you can sort of compare. They ask people to compare two different items with different attributes, and they do that a lot of times. And then you can say, this is how important this group of people thinks this attribute is compared to this other one. So we're starting a project to do the same kind of idea with public policy, where we will survey people, ask them, okay, here's policy X. We're not going to tell you what it is even, or at least in the beginning. Maybe we will at some point. Some policy is going to cut child poverty 10%, but it's going to add $30 billion to the deficit every year. It's going to increase average marginal tax rate by 0.3 percentage points. How much would you take that policy over this other one that maybe does less of each of those kind of things, or it sort of makes those trade-offs? Political polling is really not that good when it gets into policy because it never asks about those trade-offs. But if we start asking, then we can help people understand what their own values are. And there we can move on to where the values of a group of people and how we then synthesize those kind of values and figure out what kind of policies can maximize alignment with those values. Thank you.
You mentioned that you had founded the UBI Center earlier. So I was curious if in policy engineering you have anything related to UBI or negative income tax modeling?
Yes, we do. Actually, David did an analysis for the People's Policy Project on.
Yeah, so Representative Rashida Tlaib, her bill is the End Child Poverty Act, which would consolidate the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and it would create a universal child allowance administered through the Social Security Administration. I used Policy Engine to analyze it. That was probably some ago.
Before David worked at
Yes.
Policy. Yeah.
But the analysis is at the People's Policy Project, if you want to check it out.
And in general, I think we have a range. Most of the policy parameters, the vast majority of them that are in the Policy Engine interface, are those that represent features of current law. UBI is not part of current law, so we've made some exceptions to add maybe 25, 30 different levers around basic income. So you can change it depending on your age, what the phase in, what the phase out, and also disability supplement. There's a lot of different things you can do to customize your own basic income policy. Basic income is a very simple policy. Part of what got us interested in building this is because it's the transition that becomes very complex. If you are interested in exploring something that makes the policy more universal, how you raise the revenue for that, who's that going to leave better or worse off? That's really where it gets difficult. Also, one project we'll be releasing in Q1 is the closest thing to this AI policy advisor that we've done so far. We were commissioned to do a study of what happens if you do replace the full, basically, income tax and benefit system, all the means tested programs with a basic income. But you want to do it in a way that minimizes the extent to which people are worse off. So what happens, first of all, what are the basic income levels? So you can sort of adjust it. We basically have a very large space where surveying tens of thousands of policies with different basic income levels for different age groups, and seeing which one best aligns to those values, and then varying also the tax rate. So for a different level of redistribution, what kind of poverty and other kinds of outcomes do you get from that? So stay tuned for that report. Well, we'll stick around. So if you have any other questions for us, feel free to reach out. But yeah, again, thank you for your time and the really thoughtful questions.